Okay, so good morning, good afternoon. Lisa Illichmann and Sophie Boyer here speaking again. We've taken a break of quite a few days because due to personal commitments and things to do. And we're coming together again today to perhaps talk um, kind of unprepared in a sort of unprepared sort of a way. We had planned something, but we've thrown that out the window. And I think what's moving the both of us these days, we had some email communication with each other about the challenges at the moment and how challenging this can be. And I'm talking really about the challenges inside, not the challenges outside. Of course, the challenges inside are triggered by by what's going on. And both Sophie and I have um, an extensive background in the Dharma, as many of you do as well. And I think we had this exchange sort of in times like this. It's tempting for us to sort of hide behind the Dharma, to slip behind it and to use it as a vehicle to escape the feeling aspect of what's going on right now, and about what's going on within us. And I know myself, there's a lot there's a lot to be feeling right now. There's a lot going on, and some of it is very overt and very obvious, and much more is really subtle. It's real subtle stuff that if I meditate right, or if I do the right mantras, then I don't have to feel it. I can sort of push it away, because somehow deep down inside of me is that feeling I shouldn't be. I have that behind me, for God's sakes. I shouldn't be feeling that. A good Buddhist wouldn't be feeling that right now, and I am. And I think this subtle stuff that that tends to be even more kind of has longer tentacles than the real obvious stuff, and it sort of goes into every aspect of our being very subtly but very profoundly. And maybe we could talk about that today, about the not wanting to feel that, or the hiding behind the Dharma kind of thing that we tend to want to do. And it's easy to do, and Buddhist offers a very, lots of good practices that we can use to avoid really being here. And so I guess what I'd like to do is trigger a discussion about being here. Just really, really, really being here, and really being here for that experience, no matter what that experience is. And Sophie, I'm going to leave it at that. I told you. I'm just going to throw it at you. And I just threw it at you. Yeah, maybe you can pick it up here a little bit and say something from your side about the hiding behind the Dharma thing, or really feeling what you're feeling.
Yeah, to open to a present situation. That's what Dharma is inviting us to do, or maybe invite us to be in that space. And it's precisely, well, I can only speak for myself, the difficulty. It's really to open, to have the willingness to face the actual situation, because the actual situation is not easy. And I'm pretty sure that in saying it's not easy, everybody can relate to that. I think we've never faced so much uncertainty. Uh, we have never been so confronted to such a radical change, so sudden. And how many strategies, gross or subtle, the mind is really setting up in order not to engage ourselves with this. And that's what you were saying, Lisa, about using the Dharma in order to avoid that. And yeah, it can be very subtle. I could see for myself that really trying to use the Dharma in a very theoretical way in order not to be in contact with the unpleasantness of my situation in France, of being confined at home with 1 hour to go out, to have to bear to uh, the restlessness of everybody, to have to bear with the criticism of a lot of people, my own criticism, to bear with colleagues, to bear with everything. It's really not easy. And I've noticed for myself that really the difficulty was really again to really relate to just the simple unpleasantness of this, just being with this unpleasantness and how to respond to it. And most of the time seeing very subtly to react actually, and recognizing my own pattern of having the tendency to react in avoiding or in denying, in working, engage myself in a lot of activities in order not to face the things, but still, feeling a kind of a little anxiety always here, but not really paying attention. So really to really recognize that this is just recognizing this attempt to avoid. I don't know if you want to say more, Lisa.
Before we pushed the record button, you said something about, I don't remember the exact words, so I'm kind of paraphrasing, but you spoke of, we are very object oriented. We orient towards out there and what's happening out there, and we analyze and we fixate and we think about, and we sort of always are intent upon that. And then I think what we also tend to do is that we take the Dharma also as an object. And, we look at the practices and we do the practices, but they're out there, they're separate from us. And we're looking at the practice and we're looking at the problem, in quotation marks. And all of this is outside of us, and that keeps us very much so um, looking at the subject, looking at ourselves, not our, really our thoughts, because that too is really just the object, but just really being with that subject, to really step into that that aware space, if I can use that sort of term that I don't really care for, but to be the subject. I know my mind loves telling me, oh, that's the problem, it's out there, and this is a problem, and that's a problem, and I've come closer to myself over these past few weeks, much closer than ever before, in realizing, really truly experientially realizing that there is no problem. It's all, if there's a problem, it's the way the mind is dealing with it, number one. And even that, it's not, it's just seeing it and being with it, just literally being with it, to be with that, to be with all of that, to see that the object that I'm thinking about and the thoughts that are coming up about that, that they're all appearing in the same space. They're all basically the same thing. And to just be with that and to allow that feeling, it's that feeling. You said uncertainty before. There's just such a high degree, I sense, such a high degree of uncertainty, both within myself and, coming out of others. And I hear this in conversations. And this uncertainty is just ubiquitous at the moment. It's sort of we just have no idea what's happening. And this opens up such an uncomfortable space kind of thing that I suppose we avoid, as you say. Just don't go there. Anything, just don't make me be there. Don't make me be in that space of having absolutely no idea of what's going to happen, but not in an intellectual way, just really having no idea what's going to happen. And being there, not in that uncertainty. And that is so uncomfortable. And I suppose, I see myself and my unbelievable ability to intellectualize the Dharma, to intellectualize the practices, and to hide behind them, and to use my, the scalpel of my intellectual thinking to, and I hide behind it. I don't have to be here because I can analyze and I can intellectualize and I can meditate and I can practice, and I don't have to be here. And right now, I suppose what I'm kind of doing is really just more and more just being here. And it's not altogether pleasant, if I might say that.
Yeah, and one thing we could add to this is really, in facing uncertainty, in facing this radical question of, I don't know. I don't really know what's going on. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I think this facing this fact is triggering other stuff that might be very interested to pay attention to, actually, in terms of practice, is that it can really question the idea of who we think we are, on what we are, on what we base our sense of identity. And the second thing it triggers also is to really to face the unreliability of everything that happens in life, that there is really a kind of unsatisfactoriness to everything. So these 2 points are really, this is really facing this question of not knowing that really reveals it. And maybe to come back to the first one, that is that if things are not certain, why does it question the idea of who I am? Is that because usually I define myself upon where I live, what I have, what professional status or social status I have, from which category in life, which kind of group of friend I have, what are my ideas, beliefs, in politics, in economy, in culture, in everything. We tend to define ourselves through that. And suddenly, we're just, this is kind of, I know for some of us, not completely, but for some of us, suddenly all this is taken away. We can't be with friends we like, we can't be with family, we can't go to work, we can't go to a restaurant we like, we can't go to theater. So everything that on which we base a sense of identity is taken away from us. And this indubitably leads us to really meet this kind of shadow side, from us. This we don't really know this side of us. What are we when we are not all this? What are we? It can be profoundly unpleasant to face.
Mm. Yes, it can.
Really, the idea is really to get curious about
It can be profoundly disquieting.
that.
I speak from experience. Definitely. I definitely agree with you. It certainly is kind of pulling the rug out from under our persona's feet, if I might use that in non-Jungian terms. It's rough. It really is taking away who we think we are, and we base so much on that who we think we are, and we don't even know who we think we are. I mean, we sort of know, but some of it is just so deep and so subtle and so unbelievably unspoken that we don't know it's there until it's either gone or somebody's threatening to take it away, that we notice how much of our life is based on who we think we are and who we think we should be and what we think is important and what we think is essential. And this awakens just an unbelievable feeling of vulnerability to seemingly lose all of that. And that's very, very uncomfortable. I mean, I know myself, this is so uncomfortable. And in so many ways, I would just do so much to not have to go there. I would do so many cool things. I'll teach Dharma. I will lead all sorts of meditation groups and anything just to not have to go there. But in the long run, you got to go there. And I can't escape it. So, I guess if you ask me, what am I doing? Well, I'm just kind of going there. And it does get nicer. It's that going there kind of thing is very eye-opening and very helpful in quieting the feelings of uncertainty. And what I'm seeing in this moving into this vulnerable space or this uncertainty is what it kind of does to us. And you sort of see a couple different kinds of personality things popping up. And this is kind of circling back to sort of what we discussed about before that we said we were going to talk about today, but sort of threw out the window, but then maybe not, because I'd like to touch on that too. Is what we see is, and I have a lot of kind of spiritual friends, and kind of I'm surrounded by people who interact on a regular basis with some form of Dharma or this. But and yet what I see is a lot of complaining, and 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 I'm and I'm laughing because I complain too. But I tend my type of complaining is more self-oriented. So I complain about myself. I tend to complain at myself. But I see a lot of complaining about first. I think we were just sort of in shock about the whole thing, and now a lot of us were starting to complain about the way the governments are reacting or not reacting, or that this is happening, or that is happening, and so we complain, and in that complaining we sort of can push the responsibility away, and even if just the subtle complaining about myself, the subtle not being, this non-okayness with what is going on, and the complaining aspect of it is kind of pushing away this feeling of, well, I've got to deal with it. I've got to deal with myself. I can't control per se what's happening out there. To some degree we can discuss that, because I don't mean this complete passivity, but this complaining aspect of it just is really, really I think detrimental. And we see this come up, more and more, and we feel it in ourselves, and this is also kind of like this ugly thing that comes up, and it's like, oh no, I don't have that in me. And I do, I do. And seeing that, and then, so that's maybe another aspect of what's going on right now that's kind of uncomfortable.
Mm.
Say that.
Yeah, complaining, and on top of complaining is really, yeah, what do we choose? Of course, I guess there's a lot. I don't deny that there are many reasons to not be happy with what's going on. This for sure, and of course there is there are many reasons that would in some way justify that we can complain. But as you said, what do we decide to feed here? Because if you really look at complain, what does to complain? Complain just feed aversion. Feeds aversion, more aversion. It feeds, instead of just meeting the unpleasantness of a situation, you blame others, or you blame yourself, or others are blaming you. You just feed more and more aversion here. So is it what does it bring to feed aversion? Where you find peace there? Will you find something that will bring brightness within yourself? Just check for yourself, but what might not be. And on top, I really believe that feeding aversion, is really at some point really contribute to lower self-esteem as well, which we really don't need right now. Really don't need. We really need to stand up, and we need to, to keep a vital force alive. So really to see that aspect with blaming. I don't know. I have an example, a personal example about how to be with blame, but it's more about how you receive blame. So I don't know if you want to say something more before I talk about this, but it really enlightens what is going on, whether you decide to respond to blame with your own habit, or because you see and you understand more what's happening, how do you respond in a maybe more open and spacious way that will allow the emergence of something quite unexpected, from a space where two people, although at first they're opponents, but because you open simply to blame, how this can really completely change. But I don't know if you want to say something more before that.
Well, I might say, I think it's very interesting what you're saying about acceptance, and just this feeling, and then blame, and then your response, and this kind of thing. I think what comes up a lot in my groups is the question of, well, yeah, I feel it and accept it and be okay with that and all of this, but that all just sounds always so passive. And so, I have to kind of accept whatever's happening and just deal with it, and then just deal with what you're feeling, and then you're okay. And that again is hiding behind the Dharma. For me, that's hiding behind the Dharma. And instead of saying, okay, well, for me, that accepting what's going on is the inner complaining thing. It's this, telling myself how this is not okay, and the avoiding that feeling, that's the what I think is the most detrimental, is that not going there, and then that inner dialogue of how terrible it is, and who's to blame, and all of that. And this takes away our ability to respond, because it's not about not responding. It's not about, just accepting whatever is and just deal with it. It's not. It's like, but don't complain about it, and don't avoid it. It's don't go into it too much, and don't pull out of it. Just feel it, allow that feeling to, whatever feeling comes up. And for me, it tends to be this unbelievable uncertainty, this vulnerability, to allow that to come up, to be there with it, no matter how uncomfortable it is. And out of that acceptance of that feeling, to move into response, which can be very active. So yes, I would be very interested in hearing what you're, having your story.
Yeah, it's just to take this blame the other way around. Is how can you respond when you receive blame, and really practice Dharma instead of hiding behind.
Yeah.
and it's a personal story. It was about, I don't know, 1.5 years, and I was really at the beginning of teaching, and I was giving a day-long conference with a few practices, and I was really not self-confident at all. in the role of a teacher. And I was with my iPad and, trying to give this conference on I don't know which topic. And I had an audience of about 20 people. And I did my speech, which was what it was, as a beginner, not self-confident. So I'll let you imagine the situation. And at lunchtime, it's an open time. Everybody can discuss with every participant. And one man come to me with his wife and start to speak about what I did, and start to be very aggressive and in front of everybody, so everybody was hearing what he was saying, and really became very aggressive and pointing out how I was hiding behind my iPad, that my teaching was lacking authenticity. And actually what was interesting is that this man, no matter what he was saying and the way he was saying it, it was okay, aggressive, but he was pointing out some true facts. I mean, facts I could agree with. I was not self-confident. It was far away from being, fantastic. But I mean, I'm in a learning process. I do what I can. And what is very interesting here is really we find ourselves here really at a crossroad. What do we do with that blame? How do you decide to respond to that? Because blame is really part of life, as you said, and no matter what it will happen, you will blame other will blame you. So how can you engage yourself creatively with that, and try to respond as best as you can? And here really to apply the Dharma really is to, for me, first, is to connect with how it feels to receive blame. And really to see if you can find a stable place enough within yourself when you be in contact with the unpleasantness of that experience, because this is really the starting point. It's not about saying, well, I'm beyond, this. It's what you said, Lisa. It's really about meeting right here, right now. This man is aggressive to you. How does it feel? And to be really in contact with that, feeling the tension in the body. And also being in touch, with my own habit in responding to that situation. This also can be acknowledged, and my habit in that kind of situation is just usually the tendency to want to run away. Ooh, I want to go away. But in that situation, I'm in front of an audience. I'm supposed to be a leader. So better I respond the way I put into practice what I have come to teach. But it's not easy. As you said, it's really not easy. You have first to have this willingness to open to the challenge, to open to what is unpleasant, to what is difficult, to what you dislike. But if you can stay there, if you can open to that, what can happen can be magic. Is that instead of going into reactivity, and as we were mentioning earlier, feeding aversion and responding, fighting back, being aggressive or running away, I would like to do. What did I decide to do? I decided to say, okay, this is unpleasant. I don't like it, but my responsibility is that I have to respond because I have an audience. And I start to be interested in what the person is saying. Do we have enough time? So I decide to say, I just say yes to the situation. I really say yes. And I said, okay, maybe this man has something to teach me. I ask questions and start to making speak, and really getting interested to what he has to say. And, it's not very interesting here what happened, why he did that. There is reason, etc., etc. But for us as a practitioner, what is really interesting to understand here is to really see that opening to blame is about recognizing that you don't need to be totally defined by blame, is to recognize that it's coming here because there is certain conditions, because I am a beginner, because this man wants to do something, wants to say something, bang, there is this, and blame is coming up. But really realize this is something that's not going to last. So really to see the impermanence in there, but it's not going to last. You don't need to get defined by it. And third, really, again, to be in contact with the dukkha, the unpleasantness, the unsatisfactoriness of being in contact with that. And once you identify these three things, you're in some way you're free. Or you start to see it's not you're free, but there is the emergence of a space where you can really respond otherwise. And as I said, that's what I did. There were enough space for me to get interested to what this man has to say and to really understand. Actually, he just wanted to be acknowledged. That's all he wanted to. He wanted to be acknowledged. And actually, that was the magic in that example, is that in the end, suddenly he stopped talking and he said to me, "But you really hear me?" And this man really had tears in his eyes. And that's the magic. That's really the magic here, is that if we can find a space within, we can stand still, firm, and say, as you say, it's okay to be there, not to refuse, not to be afraid. Or if you're afraid, saying, okay, I'm afraid, but I can go for it. And see that here in that space, everything is possible, and you could be surprised. And what was the one of the great lesson in that is that to see from kind of an enemy space, you become the best friend in the world, and it ended up with a hug, and a deep sense of interconnection between each other. So it's really to see how with our habitual response in really, actually we locked ourselves with blaming and other things. We really locked ourselves. We define things, that's like this, that's like that, and there is no space for co-creating something different that can be maybe more skillful, maybe more wise or more lightful, I don't know. And to really see that if we can't open, we get identified by one idea, we get identified by one emotion, we get identified by a set of thoughts, and we're locked in there. We're really locked in there.
Thank you. Yes. I think we're at about 30 minutes now. I want to take a few of your words to end with, because I think that sums it up beautifully. Saying yes. I think saying yes that struck me now, being the ability to say yes to that, whatever it is that's happening, to say yes to what's happening outside of you, and more importantly, to say yes to what's happening inside of you. And then if you can say yes to what's happening inside of you, then you can set positive or helpful and skillful actions, which will help co-create. That's the word that you used. That can help cultivate, which is a word that I've been enjoying the past few days. To co-create and to cultivate a more wholesome life, world, situations. And it is our responsibility. But we begin by saying yes to what's happening inside of us, even if it's really uncomfortable. So 34 minutes, Sophie. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa.
And we'll be back to see you all again very soon. Thank you for listening. Okay, stop.